This is the Lord of the Rings podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about the finale of The Rings of Power, Season 2, Shadow and Flame.
Hear me! Shadow of Morgoth! Hear the dying words of Celebrimbor. The Rings of Power shall destroy you. And in the end, I foresee one alone shall prove your utter ruin! You are wrong. I am their creator. I am their master. No. You are their prisoner. Sauron. Lord of the Rings.
Welcome back to our circle, fellow ringers, for the final time on The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, as we're talking about the finale, Shadow and Flame. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
And rounding out the circle, fellow ringers, I am one of your other hosts, John. Welcome back, fellow ringers, to, our final episode discussion of the Season 2 of The Rings of Power. Really great season, beautiful television, and some great action and stories going on in this, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a real shame, actually, that we're coming to the end of this season. It seems to have flown by. I think that's a real great indicator, at least for me, as to how much I enjoyed it. It just flew by. Really wanted to get to each episode. I loved this season and how it built on Season 1. So, all good for me.
Absolutely, we were pretty high on Season 1. We enjoyed Season 1, definitely. But as you look back at it now, you see all the setup that was done in Season 1 to allow them to do Season 2 the way they have. It's been a fantastic season. As it stands at the moment, Season 3 has yet to be greenlit. We know production moved to the UK for Season 2 and Season 3 originally, and the plan from Prime Video is that there will be 5 seasons of the show. Season 3 is all written, but apparently there will be an announcement within the next month, which I suspect is probably at New York Comic Con or sometime around that time. There'll be an announcement made on Season 3, but all the signs are pretty positive. The viewing figures were very high for the second season after that initial drop-off that we saw in Season 1, but very excited to hear how we're going to get a Season 3, because these shows, with their high production value and the costs involved and the significant CGI work, usually take about 2 years to produce, so it'll be a while before we're back in Middle Earth.
I would think so, yeah, absolutely. But fellow ringers, of course, if you're new to the podcast and are only just joining us after you've watched all 8 episodes, please head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast on any good or evil podcast player of your choice. And of course, you can send in any emails with feedback, theories, or observations on anything that we cover over at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, as well as over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. We are covering not only The Lord of the Rings at the moment, but we are covering Agatha All Along, a Marvel cinematic production for TV, as well as DC's cinematic production for TV, The Penguin. So yes, we are all over the properties at the moment. DC, Marvel, and of course, The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's been a big couple of weeks covering all 3 of those shows, and our final episode of The Rings of Power. So let's get into it, John. Let's discuss The Rings of Power finale for Season 2.
Yes, Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Of course, the show is based on The Lord of the Rings and the appendices by J.R.R. Tolkien. The showrunners for the show are J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who also wrote this episode, again, as they usually do. This episode was directed once again by Charlotte Brandstrom, who directed most of the episodes this season. So very much in the more cinematic tradition this time, where we have one director directing most of the episodes and the showrunners for the show writing most of the episodes as well.
Absolutely.
So this feels much more like a movie and much more cohesive, I suppose, when you do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Although I must say there was a lot of jumping around in this episode in terms of just sort of touching on or rounding out some of the elements in Middle-earth.
Yeah, I think last couple of weeks when we've stepped back and focused much more on Eregion and what was going on with the elves, they kind of let some of the stories sit to the side until they could come back to them in the finale as well, which I think makes sense as well. You got to have a focused story for this season, so did a really good job of that. And John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with the synopsis for episode 8?
Sure. Prince Durin confronts his father, the king, as the king goes against all the advice of his son and Narvi, his advisor, and opens a large mithril deposit under Khazad Dûm. The Balrog that lives below the mithril mine, awoken by this activity, attacks King Durin, and in the ensuing fight, the king is lost as the entrance to the cavern collapses. In the aftermath, Prince Durin assumes his place as the next in line to the throne. Meanwhile, in Rhûn, the stranger goes to the Storrs Canyon to help Nori Brandyfoot and Poppy Proudfellow. He rejects the Dark Wizard's offer to supplant Sauron, and the Dark Wizard destroys the canyon. The Storrs, who refer to the stranger as Grand Elf, are forced to find a new home, and are joined by Nori and Poppy. The stranger takes a branch from a tree in the canyon as his staff, and returns to Tom Bombadil. The stranger says to Tom he will come to be known as Gandalf. In Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn learns from the Palantir that Halbrand was actually Sauron in disguise and accuses Miriel of aligning herself with Sauron, discrediting the results of her trial by the Valar. Hungry for power, Ar-Pharazôn has all members of the faithful accused of treason and arrested. Despite following Ar-Pharazôn to this point, Iarion warns Elendil and he avoids capture. He attempts to escape with Miriel, but she refuses to join him, giving the Sword of Narsil and sending him to reclaim his lordship in the west of Númenor. On Middle-earth, Kemen claims Pelargir as a military outpost for Númenor on behalf of his father and demands the Southlanders and wild men cut down the forest in exchange for shelter and supplies. Isildur and Estrid acknowledge their feelings for one another, and he asks her to return to Númenor with him, but Kemen does not allow this, and Isildur leaves Estrid with her betrothed, Hagen. Finally, in Eregion, Sauron tortures and kills Celebrimbor. He is approached by Glug, an orc who has grown disillusioned with Adar's leadership. Galadriel finds Adar in his original elf form, as revealed by Nenya, and he returns the ring to her before he is killed by Glug and the orcs that have pledged themselves to Sauron. Sauron reluctantly attacks Galadriel, but ultimately takes the 9 rings for men for himself, but she jumps off a cliff before he can take her ring, Nenya. While King Durin IV sends his army to aid the elves, allowing Elrond, Gil-galad, Arondir, and other survivors to escape to a valley north of the city. Elrond and Gil-galad use the elven rings to heal Galadriel, and elves resolve to stand against Sauron's army as it marches across Middle-earth.
So I guess we have a bit more of a hopeful end at this part of the season. Last season seemed to end with the darkness rising over Mordor, and what we knew then was Sauron going to Mordor. This season ending a bit more hopeful, where the elves resolve to stand against Sauron's army, even though, obviously, behind all that, we have Sauron's army now marching across Middle-earth. But it does seem a little more hopeful. Maybe it's just the bright colours and the beautiful location.
I think the point here is there's still hope.
Yes.
But it's not been a roaring success. I mean, effectively, Eregion has fallen. Its lord is dead. The orcs have been snaffled up by Sauron, and Adar, who you could have seen sort of rallying them against Sauron, is dead. So, yeah, there's a lot not to be hopeful about, but there's
some hope.
There's still some hope with the survival of the leadership of the elves.
Yeah.
And the alliance that the elves managed to sort of have with the dwarves ultimately.
Yeah.
But certainly things are on a knife edge here, I would say.
Yes, they are. So it must have been just a lovely location at the end of the episode then that made me feel a bit brighter. Let's get into our discussion of our Tales of Middle-earth, starting out with our tale number 1, right at the beginning of the episode, King Durin versus the Balrog. Leading on from last week's episode where Prince Durin was unable to lead his army to join out with the elves, he went back into the caves of Khazad-dûm to confront his father, who was fighting against all the other dwarves to get himself to the seam for an even bigger mine that he was for Mithril, that was even further down in the mines of Khazad-dûm. And they have their confrontation just outside, I suppose, the final strike of the hammer that King Durin's going to use to break through to his new seam, effectively. There's a really interesting back and forth between Prince Durin and King Durin, where Prince Durin is telling him, when I was a kid, we used to have arm wrestling matches, and you used to try and pretend that I was winning, and then you'd beat me. So I always knew that you were stronger than me. The strongest thing in this world is my father, the king. So why can't you be strong now and take off the ring? But King Durin wants to prove to Prince Durin that he's taking the right guidance from the ring, that he's able to find these seams of great wealth by following the directions from the ring, and breaks through and tells Prince Durin, the only way I'm able to see the mountain, the way I'm able to see it and claim it as our own, is if I wear one of the rings.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting discussion. And again, because of the guidance that Prince Durin has been getting from the people around him, like Narvi and like his wife Disa, he's not going to follow King Durin's lead and take a ring and put it on himself. He's going to try and encourage King Durin to take off the ring.
No, but it also, that story that he tells, sort of in the darkest hour with the Balrog rearing up after he's broken through into this vast chasm and its mithril seams, is that, he says to his son, you were getting stronger, because Prince Durin confronts his father to take off the ring, or I'll take off your hand. Prince Durin here is really conflicted, but he also then kind of breaks down and say, I don't have the strength to do it. I can't do this. And actually, before the king goes to protect his mountain, his son, and the people of Khazad-dûm, and to regain, I guess, some of his agency, his pride, whatever, he does come back to his son on that story to say, no, it wasn't me lifting so that you thought you were winning. It was you getting stronger. You are strong enough to lead the people of our mountain. So I really like that.
Absolutely.
And I mean, ultimately, then the Balrog, the growls, the attacking, so epic.
Absolutely.
So good. I thought the image of King Durin sort of leaping into that chasm and having the Balrog's sword hit his axe and just that sort of explosive reaction. So good. I mean, it was massive. I mean, what an opening.
It's incredible.
I was like, this was so freaking good.
It was really, really good. And just to say, Durin does take off the ring. King Durin takes off the ring, leaves it to the side before telling his son, actually, it was you getting stronger as a child. So Prince Durin has gotten through to him before the attack of the Balrog. And as you say, King Durin wants to reclaim his agency, takes off the ring, and then goes in to attack the Balrog. And he also names his son King Durin as well in the moment. So as he goes to sacrifice himself, knowing he's probably not going to be coming back from a battle with the Balrog, he does say to Prince Durin that he's now king, but does leave behind the ring. So he has given him that instruction saying, this is our mountain, and I can see that because of me using the ring. He takes it off, goes into battle in that glorious looking scene where it looks directly out of an Alan Howe painting, or
it does, doesn't it? It really
absolutely
does.
Beautiful. As he jumps into the flames, but he is passing on the legacy to his son, and also leaves behind the ring, telling Prince Durin, you may want to use this in the future. So I don't know whether he's specifically learned the lesson that Prince Durin is trying to teach him in this moment, but he does go out in a big heroic moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Really heroic. Yeah, I mean, this was just so good. And I mean, in the end, it is the cavern being blocked back up from the sort of explosive clash of Dwarven axe against Balrog fire sword. Now, interestingly enough, it still feels in this moment, even though we do come back to Khazad-dûm, where again we have some glorious imagery of the throne shrouded in like a dark muslin of some description, like a funeral rite that's being conducted, and it all kind of looks fairly peaceful, even though it's somber. But I just wonder, the Balrog's still there. To me, Khazad-dûm is clearly still under threat, even though maybe it's just subsided for the moment to allow them to kind of recoup, certainly send some of their forces to the aid of the elves at Aragion. But equally, it's interesting that the Balrog's probably been buried quite deep again, but
the threat's there.
The threat is there, and the access is there now because of King Durin finally sort of breaking through between where Khazad-dûm is and this whole cavern, and Mithril seems created ultimately with by the Balrog and the lightning. I think we saw that in the first season.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It was created as he arrived there. Yeah, there is another couple of threats that are mentioned as well later on in the episode as Prince Durin kind of goes to take the throne. We find out that all the people that the previous King Durin, his father, had treated with, they're all looking for a recompense for all of the support they'd given. They're all looking for all the things that he had asked for, and there is another claim on the throne. His brother is also saying he's entitled to the throne. So we haven't met his brother before, but there is a mention here that he feels entitled to the throne. So this conferring of Prince Durin becoming King Durin may not go as smoothly as we'd hoped.
No, absolutely. Trouble in Paradise.
Yes.
Or Dwarf Paradise, at least.
Yeah. And just to reference, one of the specific things that's called out is the Blue Mountain dwarves are looking for recompense for the support they've given to King Durin. The Blue Mountains are a key location in The Hobbit. That's where Thorin Oakenshield was king in The Hobbit. So interesting to bring those specific group of dwarves in there as well, because we haven't really seen anybody other than King Durin with a dwarven ring, and there's 7 of them. So I presume we will see the dwarven kings that are wearing those rings in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Show, right, as it continues. So nice to have a little reference to the Blue Mountains in there.
Yeah, definitely. Shall we move on to our tale number 2?
Yeah,
The Faithful Fall in Numenor. Yes.
This was interesting, actually. The interpretation of what Ar-Pharazôn saw in the Palantir, because I didn't get it when we saw it in the episode, when he puts his hands on the Palantir, sees Halbrand in there. It was almost like the Palantir was telling him he was going to join up with Sauron in future. That's what I thought the Palantir was saying to him. But he's taken that interpretation to mean that because Halbrand was involved in Miriel going over to Middle-earth, the whole events of last season, he's taken that to mean that she aligned herself with Sauron, and therefore she is not entitled to be leader of their people. She's aligned herself with the worst bad that Middle-earth has seen since Morgoth, really. So, I thought it was quite an interesting kind of jump without much given to the audience. We kind of see it through the eyes of Ar-Pharazôn.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you can see that Ar-Pharazôn is so intensely political, and you just wonder, is that what he believes, or is that what he is using as an interpretation for his actions? Because equally, they effectively were able to overthrow Miriel because of the Palantir. So he can't really, I don't think, say that he saw it in the Palantir. Do you know? Because otherwise, it's the elf magic and the Palantir as being sort of created by the elves.
Well, according to them, yeah.
According to them, that was the reason for Miriel effectively to be replaced on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, linked to the, unsuccessful defense of Middle-earth. So you don't really get a sense from Ar-Pharazôn as to whether he's said that's come from the Palantir.
Yeah, you're right. He's probably not. He's probably said he's received word that Halbrand actually was Sauron. And because Miriel had aligned herself with him, then therefore she shouldn't be allowed to be on the throne.
But in true politician and sort of coup d'etat, which really, in a sense, you could argue Ar-Pharazôn is, he's able to sort of disrupt and nullify effectively that that whole sequence in the judgment of the Valar in the big pool, which you could see really irked him at the end of last episode. It was almost giving Miriel a second wind to her claim to the throne. He hadn't consolidated yet. So he uses it to sort of really effectively pull the rug again from under her feet. But also then to consolidate this, he starts and goes after the faithful leadership that are gathered together. So, naming them traitors of Numenor, both the faithful leadership, anyone that gathers together and observes the religion of the faithful, and Miriel as their leader. So people are being rounded up, which we see he sends them out. And in this instance, Elendil is also in trouble. But his daughter has still an ounce of loyalty to him, having been created from his loins. But we see here that Elendil, his daughter, Iarion, at least retains some kind of snippet of loyalty to her family as she kind of goes to warn him of this roundup effectively.
Yeah, and I have to say I've loved what they've done with Numenor this season overall. I love the story of it, but it just seems so quick at times. So while you have this slight turn in the Arryn, if you think about it and you understand her motivation, it has all come from the fact that she thinks her brother was killed in the battle while they were over in Middle-earth. She believes that Isildur is dead, so that drove her to join up and join forces with Kemen and with Ar-Pharazôn. So understandably, she doesn't want to lose another family member. She doesn't want to lose her father to this situation, but because the scenes are so close together in this episode, she's the one that rings the bell, that calls all the faithful in as they all get captured. And then the call is made that anybody who's a faithful, anybody aligned with Miriel, is to be taken out. And she realizes what that means and goes down to her father and gets him out of there. But it's all done so quickly. This is absolutely something that could have been spread over a few seasons. Maybe 2 seasons telling this whole story. I know they just got a lot to get through, and there's hundreds of years that are going to be told over the course of the 5 seasons. But there's just moments where I feel like Miriel winning at the end of episode 6, wasn't it, where she had the trial in the pool, being called the Queen of the Sea. That should have lasted for a few episodes, her being back in leadership, and then Ar-Pharazôn finds a way to take her down again. It would feel much more like the Game of Thrones, the Dragon kind of style of storytelling. Then,
seeing Ar-Pharazôn scheming, to kind of undermine the result effectively of that trial by the Valar and the Sea Worm.
It
would have been really good. I mean, even him sending Kemen off to Pelagia, in order to create this outpost, as well.
We didn't see any of that.
We didn't see any of that. So it does sometimes feel a bit jumpy, I think.
But I'd feel if you were a citizen of Numenor, you wouldn't know how to react to any of this. There's so much going on. It feels like it's all happening within a week, where power is moving back and forth and back and forth. Who's my leader? Am I allowed to be to pray in this church? Am I allowed to follow this leader? Am I allowed to talk about the past and talk about be a faithful? Or is everything going to come crashing down and everybody's going to die tomorrow? You know, that's what it feels like. It's just going by so quickly, and it's a really interesting story. I love if they spent a little bit more time on it, because as you mentioned, that moment when Kemen arrives in Pelargir comes as a complete surprise. I wasn't expecting that at all.
No, absolutely. I got a bit confused, I have to say, about Pelargir here, because you had Isildur and Estrid seemingly coming back together again.
Yeah.
And then Kemen arrives, which again, I wasn't expecting. Yeah. You have Kemen and Isildur embrace and hug because Isildur sees Kemen, who he knows, doesn't know what's happening in Numenor, but soon finds out about the fact that, you know, Kemen would have killed his father because of his father's support for Miriel and that betrayal of his own father, Pharazôn. But then we see Isildur on the boat, going back to Numenor, seemingly with only hints of potentially the chaos or the fragmentation of Numenorian society. And I don't even know whether Kemen knows what's happened post the trial by the Valar and what Pharazôn has done. So will that be a big shock to Kemen? And then we see Estrid and Hagen holding hands as Isildur is leaving. So to me, this kind of felt like, here we go, we have to sort out Pelargir because Isildur is there. There you go. Loads of things happening one way, then reversing, and then back again, and then like he's pleased to see him, but he just said he's going to kill his father, but I'll get on that boat with him anyway. So I don't know. It just felt, because of that need to do it in this way, with it being the last episode, so much happening at Eregion that has to be covered. And that is the central focus, and I agree. And
they're being 2 years before another season, so they have to do something about it. They can't leave it open because there is a story there.
But it felt like it was right. Here's a visual kaleidoscope of everything that needs to happen in Pelargir.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think it's just the nature of that first kind of, 15 to 20 minutes where we went Khazad Dûm, Numenor, Pelargir, and then, you know, it just felt like we need to cover this. Here's the block of
it is. And it's absolutely that. It's without a doubt that's what it is. And I have complimented the season for focus. And that's been the big thing that's made this season better than season one. We didn't drop in with two characters for 5 minutes in every single episode. There's been times where we've had the Harfoots not on screen for episodes. Here with Isildur, the last time we saw him was when he was with Arondir, which was about 4 episodes ago.
Yeah.
But let's try and piece it together a little bit, because this is the final episode of the show. I mean, let's piece together what they actually said and what actually happened. So Isildur and Estrid and Theo went back to Pelargir. Theo because that's his home, Estrid because that's going to be her new home, and she's taking back her betrothed Hagen, who they saved when they were with Arondir. The reason why Isildur is there is actually to wait for some of the Numenorians to return and take him back home. That is his motivation. That's what he's there for. He's always said he's going to Pelargir to find a way back to Numenor.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. He is the heir to one of the kings of men, one of the kings of the Numenorians. So he has got a very high place in Numenor.
Oh, absolutely.
And the conversation he has with Theo is a very important conversation. He says to Theo, I've learnt that I've been making myself small and I need to take my rightful place back there. So that's one part of the reason, I suppose, that he's there, and it is the reason why he's on the boat with Kemen. Kemen, I believe, actually left before the trial of Miriel, although we didn't see it on screen. Our Pharazôn kind of said to him, "You've done enough." His father said to him, "You've done enough. Get out of here," basically, sending him on this mission that we didn't hear about, going to Pelargir. So he doesn't know that the winds have changed again in Numenor. and then changed back to his father being actual leader. He knows that there was a struggle and a battle going on when he left, and he went off to Pelargir. But I don't think he is fully aware of the position that his father is now in, and that Muriel has been judged as the Queen of the Sea.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think
gone.
The only thing he says, is that, he says he would have killed his father, who is now a traitor, but that's from the earlier point.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
So while he's here, he wants to impress upon Isildur that things have changed for him, and when he comes back, Kemen is to be treated with the respect of the son of a new leader, effectively. Yeah. So this is Kemen, the Weasley guy that we've learned this season. And then that whole bit about Estrid and Isildur comes in, where Estrid is effectively saying, I know I was on a whole mission to get my husband back, and then I met you and fell in love with you, not him. He's telling me that he's building a house with me, and the cornerstone of the house should last as long as our love for each other, and it makes me sick. Like, what an awful thing to be saying about your betrothed or your future husband, effectively. But to keep their relationship going, Isildur's saying, well, come back with me to Numenor. And Kemen is refusing that. Kemen's refusing that request. He's saying to her, you can't take anybody with you. You're coming back. And it's almost like Kemen saying, you're coming back and you may be a prisoner when you get back there. Your father could already be in prison, because when I was there, everything was blowing up. Yeah? But he will be treated with respect, with the respect he deserves, being brought back to Numenor. But when he gets there, Kemen's kind of saying to him, I'm in a much higher position than I was when you left, and you may be in a much lower position when you get back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I say, it just felt like a rush, and I guess because it was also, as I say, 4 episodes ago, and I do think that was just one of the weaknesses. I mean, I think Pelargir and Isildur have not necessarily been that well served in the story, and I get it, but that felt like a rush. I felt much more connected with what was going on in Numenor with Miriel, Elendil, and Iarion than Isildur. And just because there's a lot of complicated stuff with Isildur, and I just think it suddenly just went kaleidoscope. Here you go. Here's everything that needs to get resolved for him to be on a boat going back there. So eventually he meets with his father. That I get. And I love the fact that we have Elendil here, who tries to, in the same way that Iarion has tried to save her father, he is there trying to save his queen, Miriel, and she is in full martyrdom mode. I need to stay here because actually you have a prophecy to fulfill here for Elendil, and it's connected with the sword of Narsil, and this is the sword that will ultimately chop off the One Ring by Isildur.
That's right. Yeah.
So
eventually becomes broken by Sauron, and eventually becomes the sword that Strider takes, and
as
reforged. He becomes and gets reforged. The shards of Narsil, as we remember them.
But she, in giving Narsil to Elendil, it's like reclaim your lordship and destiny with this sword. So a bit more. I feel it's the emphasis goes beyond the lordship, but with the destiny bit. And whether she fully knows what Narsil will be used for from prophecy, but nonetheless she knows that there is a prophecy surrounding it, and it is for Elendil to carry it and fulfill that, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, absolutely, it is cool, and you're right. The big challenge with this whole segment that's going on with Isildur and with Kemen is that it feels like the writers are going, oh no, we're starting season 3 with Isildur over in Numenor. We have to get him back somehow. Right, send Kemen over there. He can do the pantomime villain moment. I've got you now, and take him back over to Numenor. Grant, how do we sort out all the rest of the storylines? Oh, well, we'll just put dialogue in there. We'll sort them out. Because there is also another pretty serious edict that Kemen gives to the people of Palagir. He tells them that they're not going to get fed, they're not going to get supported by the Numenorians, who Isildur has been building up as this great race of people who are here to help and here to save the humans of Middle-earth. Kemen comes in and is telling them, we're not going to give you anything unless you create an outpost here of the Numenorian society and support our army here, and everybody must cut down trees and bring the wood to us to start our fires and maintain this outpost for us. And if you remember, and again, it's almost like a dropped line, if you remember, Arondir made an agreement with the Ents that were in the woods around, killing wild men who were cutting down their trees. Yeah. Arondir made an agreement with them that no further trees would be cut down, yet here we have Kemen going, if the people here don't cut down numerous trees,
he
and
kind of
take
says
the wood to them every month, they will all die. They won't be fed.
Yeah, well, he's kind of like, and that should be easy for you lot, shouldn't it? As like literally everyone involved in that capture by the Ents are kind of side-eyeing one another to go, does he know what's in that forest?
Exactly.
You know, you see Theo, you see Isildur, you see Hagen, and Estrid all kind of looking at one another going, he doesn't actually understand what he's saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, it would be interesting to see what happens. Again, it might be that an Ent will plant itself on Kemen and use him as fertilizer. But the problem is he's on the boat.
Yeah, it would be great to see him ripped in half or ripped asunder by an Ent, wouldn't it? Yeah. So maybe he'll come back to guide his men again in a month's time or something. But that's our tale number 2. Anything else about Numenor? Anything else about Palagir?
No, that's all for me.
Let's move on to our third tale of Middle-earth for this episode, our tale of the Rings of Power for this episode.
Yes, a wizard has a name and a staff.
Yes, he does.
So
yes, he does.
Finally, they found him.
Yes, I wanted to give a little reference to Arya Stark's journey in Game of Thrones, where she was known as nobody for a while until she eventually has a name. Said a girl has no name multiple times, because throughout this series it's just been the stranger not having a name. It's been really frustrating and really annoying. I mean, it was Gandalf from very early on in the show. Finally he has a name, but it's not exactly Gandalf. The name that he's given is Grand Elf, because of his saving of the Stores, effectively. Is it a surprise? No, of course it's not a surprise. We knew it was coming. I do like the line when he goes back to Tom Bombadil and says, so I guess I'm going to be known as Gandalf from now on. It's almost like, well, I guess that's the name I'm going to be known as. And it kind of comes out of misunderstanding. Nori even explains that the reason why the Stores are calling him Grand Elf is because they've never seen elves before. So they just assume that this very powerful person that came in and saved them is an elf, is a big elf.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I just think is really interesting that it comes from that. So it's almost like he's resigned himself that this is the name I'm going to be known by, even though there is a whole conversation that happens prior to him saving the Stores. The conversation with the other unnamed character of the season, the Dark Wizard, Ciarán Hinds' character, who is waiting for the stranger to arrive to save Nori and Poppy. And he's there with an offer for the stranger. And the offer for him is, I know you. I knew you before you came to Middle-earth. I knew you when we were together. You were my friend, and you're the one that encouraged me to come here. Yet here I am. I know everything. I have all the information you want, your purpose, your name. I can help you with your abilities if you join me and we take on Sauron and then take his power and take over Middle-earth. What do you think of this whole sequence between the Dark Wizard and who we now know as Gandalf?
I really liked it, actually. I thought it added a bit of intrigue to the Dark Wizard. So I like the fact that he says he's there to defeat Sauron. And I do not embrace the name that's been given to me, which is the Dark Wizard. And I like the fact that he's duplicitous enough to say that the nomads that he has sent out are the ones that have gone rogue. So you know immediately that he's acting up a good game here. But I kind of like how he does that until really Gandalf sees through it and calls him out on it when sort of the Dark Wizard has said that they can both be the successors of Sauron if we're victorious over him. And he doesn't really sort of believe that. So I kind of like this. I like that it didn't just fall into place where he's the Dark Wizard and bad. It feels like he's more nuanced now than that. And may well be so, because okay, I get it. The Dark Wizard destroys the Storrs village with his staff. But he does also say, I'll be here when you come to your senses, when you realize that what I'm telling you is the correct thing. We are here to destroy Sauron. So there's a lot of intrigue here on this for me. And I kind of quite liked it, to be honest. I even, as you say, he says, we are as kin. And there were 5 of us. So again, the other Istar that are around in Middle-earth that we have been introduced to over the various books, such as the Brown Wizard Radagast.
Yes, who was the Hobbit. Yeah.
You know, so there's I kind of liked how this played out, but ultimately, you know, he's there and saves all the rock falling down onto the Storrs and Nori and Poppy as much as he can. But it means then that the Storrs, Nori and Poppy must leave that place because their homes have been destroyed effectively.
We heard that whole conversation from the Gund talking to the leader of the Storrs, talking to Nori a couple episodes ago, where she was saying, I will never leave here. This is where we were born, where we grew up, where I got married, where my husband's buried. I'm not leaving this area. And the Dark Wizard has destroyed everything, and now Nori and Poppy are going to be leading them as another nomadic tribe. I don't know whether they're going off to find a new home specifically, but they're going off on a similar journey as the Harfoots had done in the past.
I like how that is mentioned as well, where both the Harfoots and the Storrs are leaving, and you have Nori speaking with the stranger saying, it's the first migration for the Storrs, and they don't know what to bring or what to leave. There's a real nice turn of phrase.
It is.
And I kind of like, Nori in effect separating from Gandalf here, where he says, it's high time I walked my own path and you walk yours. And whilst Gandalf says, yes, we are different, we need to go our own ways, she does effectively correct him, saying, well, we're not very different at all. Both of them are wanderers in a sense, but also they came to a common purpose despite being different. They had the same shared values, even though unspoken in a sense, because of the fact that Nori and Poppy helped him, he helped her. This relationship that's built up through that. So I just thought this was a really nice moment, actually. Again, I could have lapped up a bit more of this ultimately. But yeah, really, really enjoyed how this kind of got resolved.
Yeah, I really like this. I liked closing out the story here. And again, one of the decisions we feel they made this season was to push the Harfoot story into just a few minutes each episode, that were the episodes they appeared in. So they could get to this point where we have the reveal of Gandalf. I kind of would have wished this happened earlier on in the season. There's no dependency on the timeline of anything else happening. It's something that's happened in its own bubble. So you could have easily done these moments early on in the season and had Gandalf revealed. But having the final moment with Gandalf sitting down with Tom Bombadil and having them sing the song, the ballad of Tom Bombadil, I think is a lovely way to end your final episode, coming to the close of the final episode. I think that's a lovely way to end it.
It is.
I think everything else could have been revealed earlier on in the season and not have it spread this far, because it does feel like having 16 episodes where we have a character called the Stranger who we know is Gandalf and then it being revealed feels like a bit of a damp squib of a reveal at the end to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree with both things. Could have been revealed sooner, but love the fact that it finishes on the ballad of Tom Bombadil, because I was just humming and singing away with it. And it was just great. Really, really good. And part of the thing that, despite everything that's happened, uplifts you at the end of this season to give you hope still that there is Gandalf and Tom Bombadil there sat down enjoying a hot cup of tea,
Yeah.
some leaf, and all singing together. And that was really cool. I really, really enjoyed it. I also like the fact that before that you have the conversation that from between the two of them, which, Gandalf is realizing that he was meant to help his friends, Nori
Yes.
and Poppy.
Yeah.
And it was the choice of friendship over destiny or power. And it was the opposite of what Tom Bombadil was effectively trying to sort of tempt him down.
Yeah. I
some
think
degree.
I think the test is Gandalf the same as the Dark Wizard?
Yes,
That's
agreed.
the test. Will he do the same thing the Dark Wizard did? And he didn't. He went off to save his friends. That was
Exactly.
more important to him. And Tom confirming that was the right choice,
Yeah.
really. So, yeah.
And to be honest, that's what gives me hope that maybe Nori and Poppy aren't effectively, all the Half-Foots aren't being cut out of it.
I really hope not, because
I hope not too.
The purpose of those characters, as we mentioned before, in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, has always been to add that lightness, add that innocence to these stories and these tales of war and these tales of battles. This show shouldn't be 8 episodes of massive battles, people fighting against each other, orc army versus elf army and human army. It shouldn't be that. There should also be a view on the world outside of this, because I think there's even a line in The Lord of the Rings about thinking back to the Shire and the beauty that's there. Knowing what it is you're fighting for is really important. Knowing that you're fighting for saving the innocents in Middle-earth is really important. It's not just about which elf or which dwarf can kill the most of the orcs, right? That's not the whole of the story. The story is the sum of all of the parts.
Absolutely. And to be honest, they provide the only point of view of the regular person,
Exactly.
Joe Bloggs.
Yeah.
Everyone else are princes, kings, high lords, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're hugely, they're a wizard, they're a witch.
Or they're destined to become a High Lord. Yeah, exactly.
The Half-Foots, like the Hobbits,
Mm-hmm.
and of course now with the Straws, are the normal, everyday person's point of view, the person that ultimately goes to the pub for a drink, does agriculture,
has 12 meals a day,
12 meals a that
Absolutely.
kind of thing, wants to have a family. It's that kind of perspective. And like you say, they are intrinsically linked to how the Rings of Power and how Sauron evolves in Middle-earth, whether it's through The Hobbit, the fact that, you have Bilbo taking the ring from Gollum in The Hobbit, and it says, it disappears and it stalls the power of Sauron for a bit more. And then you have Frodo and Samwise are the ones that ultimately take it to Mount Doom, where it can be destroyed and ultimately is. So I think they're intrinsic to it, and it would be a shame if suddenly they weren't intrinsic to the Rings of Power.
Agreed. And I think right now what's important is the influence that they've had on Gandalf becoming the person he is. If he'd met anybody else when he arrived on Middle-earth other than Nori and Poppy, he may not have become this character here sitting down with Tom at the end of the episode. Maybe what I mean is, if this was where their story ended in episode 4 of the show, you may have had a bit more of Gandalf interacting with other people in Middle-earth with the knowledge that he's learnt from becoming friends with Nori and Poppy. So you kind of see how their influence had created this loving force of the Ishtar arrived on Middle-earth, opposing Sauron, opposing the Dark Wizard. I think that might have been a way to do it. Now we have to wait to season 3 to see Gandalf operating in the world after he's learnt all these lessons. So, but then again, there were so many people that complained about having even a few minutes of the Stories and the Harfoots earlier on in the season. So I don't know how you get the balance right.
No. Or you just don't listen to them.
Yeah.
And as Gandalf said, you just have to follow your nose.
Exactly.
And I think you hear that from a lot of people in and working on such big properties. You have to come with your vision, how you want to do it. Yes, there's being faithful and so on. But I mean, equally, we were having that conversation. We're doing DC's The Penguin at the moment, which has gone through another iteration from when we did it on Gotham, which was started 10 years ago, which goes different to the story told on 60s Batman, which goes different to the origin in the comics and how the comics have altered it. So, like, the story of the Penguin, yes, there's similarities, but it's being told very differently.
Completely different. And the character is the same age, really, as characters here in Lord of the Rings. About 85 years old now. The character was created in the 40s, just like Lord of the Rings was created in the 40s and 50s. So it's not about the length of time. You just have people that feel you can't make amendments at all to the Lord of the Rings mythology, even though Tolkien was taking other mythologies and writing his stories. So, they'll be absolutely fine with a new story told in the Penguin world for Batman. So, it's really interesting, though. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let us say farewell to the Harfoots
and the wizard,
Gandalf, for the moment,
indeed,
and move on to again, the big focus for this season has been around Eregion and the elves. So let's move on to the death of two major characters for the show in our tale number 4, Celebrimbor and Adar.
Yes, indeed. For me, I have to say, I was really affected by Celebrimbor's death here because effectively, he's being used as target practice. He's being tortured by Sauron.
Yeah.
To try and find out where those 9 rings have been taken. He's been absolutely degraded here.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that all through this, Celebrimbor is now he knows the truth about who Annatar Halbrand is, that he is Sauron, he is the Lord Deceiver, that he is absolutely defiant in the face of death towards Sauron. To my mind, he's got rocks as Celebrimbor.
Absolutely.
And I just love how he goads, Sauron. He says, your only craft is treachery. The rings of power will be your downfall, and one will be your ruin. You are their prisoner, Sauron, Lord of the Rings. And you can see how it needles at Sauron to the point where it causes Sauron to effectively kill Celebrimbor before he knows even where the rings have been taken.
Yeah.
And I just thought this was such a great sort of end, really, of this relationship.
Yeah.
This creative relationship between Sauron and Celebrimbor, which ultimately gets exposed as being a pure fabrication, as a power grab by Sauron, in order to control Middle-earth. And I love how this gets played out by Celebrimbor. I think what's really nice, and I know it's not till much, much later, but I love the way that the elves that have survived this battle, when deciding what they need to do next, it is Galadriel that uses the words of Celebrimbor as their motif, really, for how they should proceed. Which is around that darkness cannot thrive in light. They need to pursue a path of light in order to have any hope of effectively defeating the darkness of Sauron. And I just really, really like this. I thought it was really, really well done.
Absolutely. Charles Edwards has been just fantastic in the role of Celebrimbor from the beginning of the show, but specifically this season, the two-hander that he had with Charlie Vickers, the two of them working together. You could see the friendship between the two of them. You could see the respect between the two of them to begin with. And then as Sauron twists Celebrimbor further and further on this path throughout the season to create the rings, I thought that just the performances have been fantastic. This final scene where he tells Sauron effectively the future, what's going to happen to him, it's absolutely correct as well. This is the prediction, the vision that he has, that the rings will be his failing and they will lead to his final downfall, is fantastic. Really loved it. But importantly, I suppose, if you think of the history of Celebrimbor he's the one that created the rings, right? So
Yeah.
he can be a villain in a lot of people's stories. You know, the tales that are told of Celebrimbor are that he is the villain who sided and worked with Sauron to create the rings. But the story they're telling here, and the actual story of Celebrimbor, is he was manipulated into creating the rings, but he was a man of a strong heart. He was a man who the rest of the elves should respect for his talent and for his ability and for his guidance and leadership that he gives.
Yes.
So having Galadriel speak that to the rest of the elves, them setting up their future together based on words that he said to her, I think is really, really fantastic. Really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And interestingly enough, as well, in terms of linking in with Adar, you have in that Forge Tower, after Sauron has slain Celebrimbor, you have Glug arriving and effectively offering his allegiance to Sauron here, as then, you know, which is kind of interesting because I didn't think Glug had headed towards Eregion. I thought he had kind of backed away, but he'd obviously gone looking for Sauron. It feels like he's gone looking for Sauron purposefully, rather than sort of bumping into him or being swept up in sort of the Uruks being forced to the side of Sauron. And that's partly because of how Glug's story plays out just in this episode to some extent. But
interesting. That's a really good read on it, because I didn't get that. I just thought that there was a kind of a mistake in the last episode, because we were absolutely convinced that Glug was staying behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was not going into the battle, and then suddenly he turns up at the exact place that Adar wanted his orcs to be. He wanted the orcs to be there to take out Sauron, and Glug's the one that's leading them into the room. And I was going, why would he be here? He should be like way behind the battle lines, because he didn't even join them when they were coming in. But that's a really good reading it, that Glug actually went out, sought out Sauron. It's just that he and the orcs, when they run into the room, are all carrying their weapons and go, are you Sauron? Or is that Sauron? Even looking at Celebrimbor, because they don't know what he looks like. So, and then Sauron asks who he is, asks what his name is. But you're absolutely right. That makes total sense now. Glug is looking for Sauron because he has turned on Adar.
He's questioned.
Well, yeah.
He's questioned Adar's approach.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, I know we'll get on to the death of Adar, but to me, it's just really, really interesting that Glug meets his own death at the hands of Sauron, and you have then, you know, like the fall of a domino, the next domino is in Glug's place, who doesn't question Sauron at all. Mm-hmm. It's like obedient service to the end. And Glug is effectively telling Sauron the dwarves have arrived at Eregion, and that they must retreat in exactly the same thing he was telling Adar. Mm-hmm. But under Sauron's leadership, he is killed, whereas under Adar's leadership, he wasn't. He was given an explanation, whether he liked it or not.
Yeah.
That same warning about being overrun and we should retreat and sort of regroup, even to come back again when we're in a better position, is met with a sword to his stomach and his death. Yeah. You know, so I thought that was really, really good.
Yeah, it's almost Sauron underlining it. There will never be a retreat under me.
Yeah.
You know, Adar was kind of keeping it open, you know, working with the Uruks as they created their own society. Sauron's going to go in and don't even question what I'm doing here. You can tell me information, but do not tell me or instruct me what I should be doing. Yeah.
You should have realized how good you had it under Adar.
True.
Effectively is what he's underlying here. And you see, you know, the next in line just effectively cower away to not propose anything to him. But interestingly, Eregion does ultimately fall, is what we hear. So maybe Sauron was right, maybe he was too cautious, was Glug, but nonetheless, that's not really my point. My point is just almost the same advice to his leader results in a very different outcome for him now that leader is Sauron.
Yeah, absolutely.
And equally, he is involved then in the death of Adar.
Yeah, I just want to call out one thing that Celebrimbor does actually tell Sauron that the rings are being taken far away from Eregion. We saw Galadriel leave with the 9 rings towards the end of the last episode, but he is lying to Sauron. They haven't gone very far. Galadriel's trying to get out of Eregion still. I just wanted to mention the actual shot, the actual scene of Galadriel going through Eregion, because it looks like one shot. It looks like a one-shot take, and it's fantastically filmed as we see elves trying to fight off the Uruks that are coming, that have broken down the wall and are coming into the walls of Eregion. You see Galadriel fighting to get some of the elves out with her and making their escape through the tunnel. I think it's a fantastic shot. But as she gets outside, she is confronted by a group of Uruks who are going to kill her until she reveals that she has 9 very good reasons that Adar might want to talk to her.
Yes.
So she uses the rings pretty quickly to get herself a conversation, at least with Adar.
Yes, and to ensure the safety of the elves that she's led out of Eregion. Yeah. Where she says, I'll give you 9 reasons, is for Adar.
Yes.
And I think that gets back to Sauron from this.
Oh, maybe. Or even, quite simply, the fact that Sauron now has Uruks like Glug on his side. That information probably spread pretty quickly that someone captured Galadriel.
Yeah.
But Galadriel going to meet Adar, a very big moment here, that Adar is wearing Nenya, her elven ring, and it has returned him to his elvish form.
Yeah.
The form that he was before he was turned into Adar, before he became the leader of the Uruks. It's a really interesting moment because it shadows the conversation that Galadriel and Adar had before they unleashed their siege on Eregion. This time Adar is saying to her, we will join together. The two of us will join forces, you using your ring, me using the Helm of Morgoth. And when we are finished and when we have beaten Sauron, we will leave, we will go off in peace and move back to Mordor. And there is that moment where he has now rethought his strategy and is saying he can work with the elves to take out Sauron.
But that is ultimately
doesn't last long.
No, and it's ultimately undermined by the betrayal of him by effectively Glug, who was his right-hand man, along with the other Uruks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether this is a plan devised by Sauron to trick Adar, we see Glug coming in as though he is injured and dying, and as Adar goes to sort of see to him, Glug sort of pulls out a knife and effectively runs him through, and then the Uruks in that place turn on him and effectively just like a frenzy of stabbing. And it's very akin to that opening episode where you see them doing the same to Sauron.
Exactly the same thing.
So it's, you know, and you have Sauron arriving here at that moment as well, as he looks down on effectively his old foe, and you have Glug saying, you know, what are our orders? And he goes, raise Eregion and bring the elf leaders to me.
Yeah.
And of course, Galadriel overhears all of this.
Mm-hmm. So kind of a sad end for Adar, ending exactly as he kind of took over power, I suppose, at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's move on to our final tale. Really, Sauron versus Galadriel.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, Galadriel absolutely refuses point blank to sort of have anything to do with Sauron here. Sauron is looking for the 9 rings. He also wants her elven ring. He sees that whilst they have this fantastic sword fight. I mean, I absolutely loved this sword fight. I loved the way actually Sauron uses Morgoth's crown as a weapon. It's just so well choreographed and used.
Such a shame they put out a poster for this episode 3 days before it came out with him using the crown against Galadriel, and I was going, you want to save that for the final episode. You want people to see that on screen and see that battle, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. You know, but he ultimately, at least, you know, he says again, what you can take from Sauron, who knows? But he says he doesn't want to harm her. He offers her his side, and says that he would have placed the crown on her head, but she refuses. And I have to say, Fergus to Galadriel, because she's also, not only does that unleash the wrath of Sauron, but she absolutely does go toe to toe for a lot of time with him. I mean, he's using all his tricks, both transforming to Halbrand, then to Celebrimbor. He's trying to mess with her mind, throw her off balance. But she does get a nick in, but he does ultimately prove maybe a bit too strong for her. But I thought this fight was fantastic.
It really was. It really was. I mean, he even transforms into Galadriel herself.
That is true.
To have that discussion. I think the actual line that he's saying to her about making her a queen and putting the crown on her head, that's connected to the scene with Galadriel talking to Frodo in Lord of the Rings, where she's saying to him she wouldn't take the ring because she would be such a queen, an evil queen, effectively. So now that's almost a flashback to this moment. She's seen Anatar, she's seen Halbrand, she's seen Sauron. In these days, she's also seen Adar and seen what he was transformed into from an elf. So that scene with Frodo also takes on a bit more meaning now from the Lord of the Rings,
absolutely.
because she sees what it could do to her. She's seen the evil take hold of these characters in the past. So we're now seeing it, I suppose, on screen. So I thought it was really good.
It was really, really good. I mean, ultimately, she's stabbed by Morgoth's crown. And it almost felt slightly, certainly with the aftermath of it, where you have Gil-galad trying to heal the wound caused by Morgoth's crown. That it had kind of, or was imbued with the same kind of magic as a Morgul blade to some extent. Probably not, but that was the closest I could kind of sort of take from it. This notion, sort of the darkness starting to spread. And I thought that was really, really cool as well.
Yeah, it really was. The fall from the mountain is very impressive looking, very well filmed as she gets herself away from Sauron at the end of the battle. Thought it was really good. She does look like she's falling to her death, but she's not dead, because we know Galadriel survives all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have Arondir, Gil-galad and Elrond finding her, and they use 2 of the rings to heal her. While I really liked the fact that they had 2 of them using the rings, that Elrond puts on Nenya and uses it to help heal Galadriel, I did think it was weird that Círdan, the third holder of the ring, played by Ben Daniels earlier on in the season, didn't come back at this point, because this is kind of the reuniting of all of the elves, right? All the survivors.
Yeah, exactly.
All the ones from Lindon who'd come, and all the survivors from Eregion are here. It just seemed weird that they would only use 2 of the rings, that it would just, that they wouldn't have the third ring there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, interestingly, Círdan has kind of vanished, which is, so it's a shame that he couldn't maybe have been brought back here, or even sort of then in that final location where there's all the waterfalls. It looks all very Rivendell.
It certainly does.
That he's not there as well. You know, given he's a craftsman like Celebrimbor, you feel like he would be there trying to protect that crafts. So he would actually be there in some capacity. Yeah. So it would have been a nice little moment to have had him there as well. I mean, I was a little bit more shocked at Arondir still being sort of as mobile and seemingly uninjured as he wasn't in the last episode.
Well, we did say we knew he had to be alive, that they wouldn't just kill him like that. But there was no mention of it at all. He's just brought in when Sauron says he wants the leaders of the elves brought in once they've sacked Eregion. He's brought in after Elrond and after Gil-galad, and he's just there, you know.
But he's full of
no
beans.
Limp, exactly. No nothing else. I'm so glad he's here. Like, I'm so glad he's back.
Absolutely.
And there is a little bit of an explanation for it, which I put in my notes, but I'll mention it here because this was one of my only real complaints from the episode, was just not tying up those things that happened in the last episode. Apparently, Adar was supposed to die earlier on in the season.
Okay.
But apparently the Tolkien family rep, the person that's responsible for the scripts, making sure that they pass by the approval of the Tolkien family,
Yeah.
liked the character of Adar so much that he wanted him to have a bigger end at the end of the season. So that moment where we have Arondir coming in and battling against Adar in episode 7, that wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have had Arondir coming back to try and take out Adar. So I think we were kind of right. It was filmed out of order, out of sequence, and made to have Adar get a bigger end towards the end of the season. So that's why Arondir had the moment, but he couldn't kill Adar there because Adar had to have his final moment at the end of the season here. So, so there's a reason for it. It's great that Arondir's back. I would have liked a little moment to explain how he is looking absolutely fine in the final episode, but he has joined up with the rest of the elves now.
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm glad he's alive, for sure. I like the fact that the elves as well are at this new location, which is Rivendell. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to start doing the same thing as
what are they going to call this?
The stranger. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to do. This is Rivendell.
So for the whole of season 3, it's going to be called the Unknown Valley.
Exactly. This is definitely Rivendell, and it's definitely as you mentioned, we see Elrond trying to prevent the destruction of various different scrolls, texts, and sort of history, craftsmanship of Eregion.
And all the work of Celebrimbor.
Exactly. It can't be lost like this. And again, Rivendell is very much like this repository of all that wealth of knowledge, craft, and so on that is done by Elrond. So I think that there's a nice little connection there with him seeing the destruction of that history and knowledge at Eregion, as well as the destruction of the city. I mean, there is a really great moment where there's a kind of a pulled back bird's eye view of Eregion being lost, where you have the big tower forge falling into the city and crumbling. I kind of like that link really to where they are stood at the end, and where Galadriel does that remembrance for the counsel that Celebrimbor would have given to her, to the High King, to Elrond, that it is not strength that overcomes darkness, but light. So I really like this moment of the 3 kind of leaders being there in Rivendell, where I used to work.
That was the name of John's company when he first moved to Ireland, yes. But not the same place, unfortunately. It wasn't as beautiful looking. But yeah, it was just something that struck me, that the inspiration that Elrond would take as a leader for setting up this place of Rivendell, which brings together people from all across all of the elven communities. His inspiration for that is setting up something like Eregion's, another repository of elven culture, now that they've lost Eregion. And I think one of the things I'd seen is that this is akin to the fall of the library at Alexandria, the loss of all of that human knowledge at the time when Alexandria fell, that this is what Elrond's seeing in front of him when the orcs are looking to burn all the books and burn all the scrolls of Eregion, that he's taking this as his big hit. It's almost like he's going, take my life, not the knowledge of our people. So that will drive his inspiration for setting up Rivendell.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the end of our chat about the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, season 2, John. Any other notes, anything else you wanted to talk about it and we haven't covered?
Just one thing. We do see at the end as well, Sauron fondling the hammer of Feanor, presumably to do the One Ring.
That's right.
To forge the One Ring.
Yeah.
So, yes, interesting that he is there with the hammer of Feanor.
Yes, definitely going to be going on to do that. And then obviously the big thing for next season, he has the 9 rings for men, so he will be going out and giving them to people of his choosing next season, right?
Oh yeah, I really can't wait for that, actually.
It'll be so interesting to see who he chooses.
Yeah.
In my head, I was questioning, because we had Elendil leaving Numenor to go off to the west of Numenor to reclaim his throne. is he going to become one of the Kings of Men that is given a ring, and does he become a wraith in the future? But I guess not, because himself and Isildur are battling against Sauron. So I presume he doesn't become a king of men.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's to claim his lordship, so he's not a king at this moment.
But when Numenor falls, when there's no longer Pharazôn and Miriel, and there's no longer Numenor, does he become a king?
Yeah, and I mean, well, he will become the king of Gondor, I'm guessing, because that's what Isildur is when they defeat, or certainly a king of men.
Yep.
But that you have the steward of Gondor, then you have that connection around, the kings and their lineage to Numenor. That the steward of Gondor just seemingly hates,
Yes.
it kind of entitled them too much in his eyes,
Absolutely.
So I don't think he gets a ring because I don't think they're established well enough. I think there will be others, but I don't know, because otherwise you would think that then Elendil and Isildur have become estranged, because Elendil has got that and becomes a wraith, a ring wraith.
And we know there are 9 ring wraiths and 9 rings, so nobody survives that, basically. Yes.
But like Isildur takes up to attack Sauron after Sauron has killed his father.
So you're right. Yeah, he probably doesn't get a ring. It's probably another 9 kings, and he may take up a position there.
I think the point is, the world of men is hugely fragmented with loads of different kings.
Exactly.
And I really want to get to know that, because I don't think I know them all.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's cross our fingers for an announcement very soon about a season 3, and then on to the end, to the full 5 seasons of The Rings of Power on Prime Video. So, John, one final thing then. Did you enjoy The Lord of the Rings of Power season 2 finale?
Yes, I absolutely loved this last episode. I think it had a lot to cram in it, but I would give this 5 bloody brilliant Balrogs out of 5. I think just for a start, that opening to me absolutely was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Really epic, really visceral. And I really thought that worked. My only little gripe is around the Isildur storyline and Pelargir. I just didn't think that worked. It just felt crammed in. Whereas all the other segments to me worked. It's only because it was kind of linked in with Numenor that I kind of went, okay.
Yeah.
But I just felt, it is the balance that you have to achieve here. And I get it. It must be really tough to do. Where you spend a lot of time with a lot of different people all the time, or you focus on one big things. And absolutely, there was a need to focus on Celebrimbor, the creation of the rings, the deception and the degradation of Celebrimbor by Sauron, the rise of Sauron, learning this craft, which is ultimately really, really important for the One Ring. That you would focus on the Battle of Eregion in the way that you had done for the majority of the last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I guess it's just the length of time till season 3, and there is so much other stuff to happen as well. So that's my only little gripe, really, I think, here. Because, I kind of loved the 3 deaths of Celebrimbor, Adar, and I add Glug in there. He ultimately didn't get the daddy he thought he was going to get with Sauron, and betrayed Adar. It's the Etu Brute moment really happening here. And then it is snotted or swatted like a fly, very quickly by Sauron, because he maybe gave him a bit of truth. So, the battle between Galadriel and Sauron, phenomenal. Loved the use of Morgoth's crown here. Where it's just kind of been used as a weapon, whereas just, it's so good. I love the sort of creativity of that. I really enjoyed the stuff with the Stranger as well. Yes, it's been a long time getting the actual confirmation. It seems like it's been drawn out by an age. It's certainly why I won't do it with Rivendell, and maybe, again, that's not a weakness of this episode, I'm glad that this episode actually finally put that to rest.
Yeah.
It's more around how you structure or pace it, together. I think, as you say, it could have been done earlier, in the season, halfway through, or episode 5, before we get into the Eregion part of this.
Yeah. It doesn't have an impact other than just having another view of Middle Earth. It just doesn't have an impact on the main story to not have it earlier on in the season. But then you just wouldn't have Gandalf in the rest of the season.
No, exactly. So, I mean, I absolutely thought this was great. I'll give this 5 bloody brilliant Balrogs out of 5.
Excellent, John. And I hate to tell you, though, the showrunners are doing it again. So the Dark Wizard, who we have been pretty sure is Saruman, in interviews after the finale has come out, the showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay have said it's very, very unlikely that it's Saruman.
Grand.
Like, who can it be? Just give us his name and we'll move along. We don't have to have a mystery box every season of what's the name of this character. That's not as interesting as they seem to think it is. It's not as interesting. If we'd had him called Grand Elf at the end of season 1, and then he takes on the name Gandalf, and he goes through all the motions for this entire season, trying to find his staff and trying to find his abilities and trying to find his place in the world, still being called Gandalf. Would that have changed anything, or would it have made it less interesting at all? No, it wouldn't.
No, and to be honest, I have a feeling that there was a mention of Grand Elf earlier as well. Yeah. So, it could have been established. I think it was ultimately had to be with Tom Bombadil to understand that that actually was his name, maybe. So, okay, a bit of, ignorance from the Istar here about actually, and, he was trying to sort of, in a sense, recalibrate after he'd fallen to Middle Earth. But I agree. I think there's no point. If it's not Saruman, fine. Yeah. I don't need it to be, for sure. So just kind of tell us. And that could be from Tom Bombadil, because he knows who he is.
Exactly.
He's got his staff, so he's chosen his staff. So I'm guessing the name, unless the name is simply Dark Wizard.
No, he said he doesn't accept that name. See?
Yeah.
But they could have just said it there. They could have said, I don't accept the name Dark Wizard. My name is Fred, whatever it is.
Exactly.
And just moved on. But I don't think doing it again, having another character where we don't have a name, is an interesting premise for season 3.
It wouldn't make any sense. Actually, I think a lot of this is faking reveals when it doesn't need to. The reveal is showing how you led up to the points in Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit, dare I say it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So actually, yes, a bit of intrigue around Gandalf at some point, because there are 5 Istars. I mean, even if it had shown kind of 5 meteors hitting down on Middle Earth, and then you're trying to guess which one is which.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That equally, but hopefully they don't go through the rigmarole of keeping the Dark Wizard.
Yeah.
Who, if it's not Saruman, it's not Gandalf.
Yep.
It's not Radagast.
Yep.
Shoot me now. I don't know enough about what the names of the other 2.
The other 2 are the Blue Wizards, but they are mentioned in the Silmarillion, and Prime Video doesn't have the rights to the Silmarillion. So the only reason that you would be keeping this held now is potentially they're going back into negotiation with the Tolkien estate going, can we have the rights to another name that isn't Saruman from your books that we can give this character the name? So we're keeping it back while we have another negotiation. Look how big the show is that we did. Look how great the first season was. Look how many people are still watching in the second season. And now we're going into the third season, and we need a little bit more from the Silmarillion without buying the rights to it. That's the only thing I'm thinking of that they might be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, fair enough if it's not a choice, but it's kind of forced upon them because,
they won't spend another $1 billion on the rights to the Silmarillion.
No, because the Tolkien, it's not even about that. Tolkien kind of estate can't simply give a name out, do you know?
Because it's all connected to the Silmarillion, yeah, and they want to sell the rights to that. If they're going to sell the rights, they will sell them. So, but famously, they weren't massive fans of Peter Jackson's version of Lord of the Rings either. So they had sold the rights. He did a great job. A lot of the public really enjoyed the movies, and they went with it. Obviously, it aided a lot to the estate, but they have been notoriously quite difficult with giving over the rights to various works of J.R.R. Tolkien, because he wasn't someone that wanted people to go out and see movies about his books. He wanted people to read the books because it's all in the writing, right? So, it's just an intriguing point that they've made, but I think they're just trying to create a little bit of excitement as they go into the third season negotiations.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Well, let's see what our fellow ringers have to say about the finale of The Rings of Power Season 2. We're going to start with an email in from Coffee and Vodka, who says, "Greetings, fellow stalemated defenders. Despite reading The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit a few times, I'm anything but a Tolkien scholar. The Silmarillion baffled me. I've never looked into the appendices or any other related books. All this is to say I can't fault the producers of the series for any unknown breaches of lore, but can say, ooh, shiny at their offerings thus far. I've greatly enjoyed this season and this episode in particular. Spectacle in every facet of the story. Not so much bringing closure, so much as setting the pitons for the rest of the long climb. Nice to see Arondir and Gil-galad still alive, and the noble deaths of Celebrimbor and Durin III. The fantastic performances all round, including those of the writing staff, the effects department, and of course the composers. We've got our name for the stranger, Gan something or other, which most likely makes his dark protege Saruman. The stakes set for the next season are high ones, and it seems we're to get our human ring rates before they go all ghosty. Finally, I hope we haven't said goodbye to my favourite character, Nori, now that she's set out on her own. So far, a grand journey. 5 glowing Galadriels, bouncing baby Balrogs, and sundered city-states out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka. P.S. I've been so trained by shows past to expect Sauron to empty out the bag in his hand only to find pebbles and hear him shout, "No!" with his fist raised to the heavens. Oh, well.
Excellent stuff,
Let's
Coffee
hope
and
they
Vodka.
don't do that.
Yeah, no, that would be hilarious. If he'd been sort of duped by Galadriel.
That would be terrible. That would be a terrible way to do it.
Of course it would.
We know the rings have to get into his hand, and I thought the scene, having the battle between the two of them, between Galadriel and Sauron, was a great way to get them handed over. I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you about just how well this has been sort of put together, acted, directed, written, produced, you name it, scored. All of that, so good. Certainly as well to your point around those noble deaths of Celebrimbor and King Durin. Again, real standout moments for me in this episode. I think Narsil, another standout moment for me. I love that kind of, at least the lore that I do know about, I guess, you know, because a bit like yourself, never ever read the Silmarillion. I found The Lord of the Rings a tough slog that baffled me as a 12, 14-year-old. Yeah. I have since read them again, but equally I would prefer The Hobbit of all his books.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I remember being stuck in India, working weird hours. So I had the Lord of the Rings at my side and read through it probably 3 times in the couple of months I was living there. So I remember the story really, really well, and remember reading through the appendices of that. But Silmarillion is a difficult read, and I suppose what's beneficial for this show is that because I don't have the rights to it, I'm not burdened by those stories and those tales. I kind of know The Lord of the Rings, and I feel like they took their jumping off point, much like J.R.R. Tolkien did himself. The Silmarillion was written after Lord of the Rings. So much like that approach, they took, here's the books that we have available to us. What story would we tell about the past that leads to these books? And I think that's kind of the way they're going. So it works quite well for us, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Also on email, Robert says, "Hey guys, been really enjoying your discussion on this series, and I appreciate it as I know you guys are also doing 3 other shows. I wonder when you guys sleep."
Never.
John, hopefully your back is feeling better. Yes, it is. I could do with a one ring, though, being wafted over it. That could be quite good.
Maybe Nenya could come in and sort it out for
maybe
you.
3 of them, actually, just to really boost the back. But it certainly is on the mend. So thanks very much, Robert, for asking. Robert continues, I've been enjoying this series. I'll keep my thoughts to two things. I love the callback to the Sword of Narsil. Mm-hmm. Do you think they will show at some point how it shattered? Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings scene? Mm-hmm. Second, what do you hope to see fleshed out most of all in Season 3? Do you have any favourite parts of Season 2? Okay, that was 3 thoughts, but I remember 1 would corrupt, 2 would divide, and 3 will balance, or something. Okay, thanks again. Off to cross the sundering seas to catch up on the Penguin. See you there. Much love and cheers, Robert from South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Robert, for your thoughts and in particular for your concern about my back. I'll say feeling a lot better.
Oh, and thank you so much for your worry about our sleep. Yes, we don't sleep at all, to be completely honest, and we are doing 3 shows at the moment.
Well, I do.
So John does. John sleeps while I edit, and then we wake up, and then we record again, and then John sleeps while I edit again.
I am the log. And Derek is the insomniac.
That's it. That's it, exactly.
Yes, that is it, indeed. But what would I like to see fleshed out in Season 3? It is absolutely the 9 rings going to the kings. Yeah. I think, as has been mentioned, seeing the 9 rings being passed to mortal men and maybe getting a glimpse of a few of them, in particular, the lead ring wraith from Minas Morgul, how they degrade into the ring wraiths, I think would be really, really interesting. So I really hope to kind of see that for sure.
Yeah.
A bit like yourself, I'd just love to have something around Narsil actually, in terms of the sword. I think that would be really, really cool. I don't know quite what they could or would do.
I feel like if you've had the creation of Mount Doom in Season 1, you've had the fall of Region in Season 2, and if you're doing a 5-season show on this tale, I think you do finish your final season with that massive battle of elves and men versus Sauron. Because that's the end of the end of this age, effectively. And I'd say you have maybe an episode to wrap up everything that happens afterwards. But I do think you would have that moment in Peter Jackson's trilogy, that moment where Narsil is shattered by Sauron standing on it after having his fingers cut off. So I think you do have that moment at some point, and I think it's right at the end of the series. I think that's
like a Season 5.
That's your Season 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say episode 7 of 8 in Season 5.
Oh, no, definitely. Yeah, but for Season 3, I really want to see the 9 rings going to these 9 kings of men, and just how maybe they turn into ring wraiths, how it poisons them. You know, it's like the Two Towers really shows the degradation, the sort of infiltration of evil into Theoden, king of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
You know, through Saruman. And I just thought it's so well done. And I could just see how that could happen with a king who has command over his kingdom, you know, with his family, his heirs, slowly starting to do stuff that doesn't make any sense, but he is their king, and this kind of blind loyalty.
Well, absolutely.
So it'd be interesting to see that.
And I suppose that's the thing. We've seen a little bit of that with King Durin in this season in the Dwarves, and again, we haven't seen what happens to the other 6 rings of the Dwarves, so I'm sure we'll see that next season.
True.
I would presume we're not going to see all 9 kings and all 9 of them turning into ring wraiths in Season 3. I presume that's to be spread over a few seasons, or you have a few point of view kings that you spend time with, and you see them falling to the darkness. You know, something in my head tells me that Theo is going to become an important character, and I wonder, since so many of the Westerners are dead, does Theo, as he gets older, rise up and become king? And we've seen an interaction, at least, with him and Sauron's blade back in Season 1. So is Theo a king that falls to darkness as he gets a ring in the future? Something like that, you know?
Absolutely.
I'd love the idea of a character that we've had in the background from Season 1 coming up to become a king and then turning into a ring wraith. So we get that full arc of 5 seasons of a story of someone that we knew turning to the darkness. You know, I think that would be really interesting.
And it's interesting because Theo is comes across as conflicted anyway. He's lost his mother. He's now lost Arondir.
Yeah, and importantly, the conversation he had with Arondir is, have you met my father? And Arondir said no. And he goes, I haven't met him, but I know it's not you. So who is his father is a question that's out there for Theo. So, is he an heir to a throne in the future?
Yeah. And interestingly, my favorite part of season 2, I think, without question, has been Celebrimbor and Anatop.
Absolutely.
But another part of it that's been really great for me is seeing King Durin and Prince Durin and the effect of the ring.
Yeah.
And because again, the dwarves, I just don't feel as though I know them as well as the elves.
And isn't that crazy to think, because the 3 Hobbit movies are focused on the dwarves, but they were nomadic dwarves. They were dwarves without a home.
Yeah.
So seeing their full society and how well realized it is in Rings of Power has been really, really good and really well realized. I've enjoyed it so much, seeing their society at its height, I suppose.
Well, I think that's it. If you think about the Hobbit with the Lonely Mountain and what happens to that kingdom under the Lonely Mountain, and you see through the Fellowship of the Rings the trip to Khazad-dûm and what's happened there, you realize that the dwarves are on the wane then, and you kind of go, I want to see what it's like where like the sun shafts, the women dwarves, all this kind of stuff. Really good. And again, Deeza's stone singing. Again, really, really good.
Yeah, so good. So good. Thanks so much, Robert, for joining us for the season. Hopefully we do see you over in Gotham for our Penguin coverage as well. It's been great to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robert.
Let's pop on over to Facebook, to our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries. First up, Sam Lowe says, so many pretty people. We need more dirty, scruffy Elrond. Well, I need more dirty, scruffy Elrond and dirty, scruffy Halbrand/Sauron. The UTI would be worth it. Who is each of your MVPs for this season, and who is your honourable mention? My MVP this season is Miriel, our regal queen. I'd follow her anywhere. My honourable mention is Annatar. We get to see his evil at work and Charlie Vickers 8 this season. I think without doubt my MVP this season, I'm kind of repeating myself as well, but I think Celebrimbor is absolutely my standout actor and character this season. I think I've loved watching his journey. I think he's been absolutely fantastic. And my honourable mention really is Elrond, because Elrond's really stepped up this season. I think I've been on the side of Elrond quite a lot. I've seen his story. I've seen why he doesn't want the rings to be used, why he doesn't want any more of them being created. And I think him stepping up and becoming the leader of the elves in the Battle of Eregion was really interesting. His heartbreak at the dwarves not being able to join the battle as he realizes the center of culture for the elves is falling behind him and he can do nothing about it. I think that's a really interesting side story that was going on throughout the season. I think Elrond's been really good.
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think between the two of you now, Sam and Derek, you've probably covered my MVP and honorable mention as well. So I'll kind of take a slightly different tack on this. I think my MVP is Elendil, certainly because you've got the Narsil here, and, just that loyalty to Queen Miriel, and sort of in the face of a really sort of cutthroat political beast that is our Pharazôn there. And, I really enjoyed this thread through this season with Numenor. Indeed, I think that trial by the Valar, really good. Yeah. Just loved that. I thought it was so well done. In terms of honourable mentions, I would say Valandil for sticking up for Elendil, but ultimately being murdered brutally by Kemen at the hands of Kemen.
Evil.
I'm also, I think, the honourable mention to Glug as well. I think he's a sort of background character, but's there with such an important character as Adar. And his story is one of wanting more and getting a hell of a lot less. A real fable, I think. And So that would be my other honourable mention, really.
I think we could make a case for almost every character having an MVP moment or having an honourable mention. Like Disa is a fantastic character. I've loved her storyline this season. The introduction of Círdan, I think, was fantastic, and what he brought to the role in those opening couple of episodes. Gil-galad had some great moments in the season. Arondir was fantastic. You know, so many great moments and so many great characters this season. It's such a great show for that. There's such a big cast of great characters. Thanks so much, Sam. Great to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. Also on Facebook, Christina Jones says, it was a good finale. Something solely underappreciated anymore is the chance for a show to grow.
Mm-hmm.
The growth from last season warrants the additional seasons. While I appreciate a young Gandalf, he and the Harfoot still lack any purpose for me in the story. Maybe that will change, but there are no stakes directly tied to the overarching theme. The Númenórean plot felt rushed with too little time spent there. However, it has all the elements to push it to the forefront in Season 3 as hugely impactful. I did want Muriel to take a far more proactive role, being vindicated by her own faith, but I know this arc is about Elendil, who has emerged a leader. While I always stan a Black Queen, I also know the storyline is more about his exceptional human self. I just hope she doesn't take a backseat now that Elendil will have both his sons, because I was all hot for that continued bond and ship. Charlie Vickers, he proved himself to be a force, along with Charles Edwards, who hands down had the best performances. I really don't want to see Celebrimbor go, and if his corpse is disrespected as a banner, orc heads will roll. Arondir, you're so cool. The show doesn't know what to do with you because you're out-elfing your seniors, and it's embarrassing. Durin, you promised Disa you wouldn't wear that ring, but then how doth the Dwarven Kings get them? Yeah, thanks so much, Christina, for that. Yeah, I think I'm totally with you there around allowing a season to grow. And sometimes certain growths occur more quickly in some seasons than others, and I think, you know, that's what's happened here. I think they really had to focus around Eregion here, and that it's such a pivotal moment in the corruption of these rings that are being made. And you know, I'm totally with you. You know, Charlie Vickers here and Charles Edwards, you know, this duo has brought some absolutely wonderful moments this season.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the one of the things from this season as well is having time to spend with the Númenóreans and seeing the interworkings over there, seeing Dwarven society, seeing Eregion working and falling. Those are all massive things that we saw in this season. I think we've often said it when we've covered shows that go more than one season, which most shows used to in the past. But we've often said the second season is far better than the first season because you got to know your characters. The writers know their characters, the actors know their characters, and they can bring much more to things. It can have more themes to it, not just the simple, will the good guy win? It's more about how does this impact them as people, you know? And that's what this season feels like in Rings of Power. There's a lot more going on behind the eyes of the characters and actors, and more in the writing and more in the world. And that can only get better as the seasons go on. So I do hope it gets to tell its 5-season story without a doubt. This season absolutely has been a great growth. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, really good. Thanks so much, Christina.
Thanks, Christina. Great to hear from you as well throughout the season. Angie Arhus finally says, wow, I just finished this episode and I am blown away. That was one of the most compelling episodes of TV I've seen in quite some time. I couldn't move. I felt like I was right there with the characters. Great job by the showrunners of wrapping up multiple storylines and teasing the next season. The Harfoot story we mostly didn't care about continued to disappoint though for me. They didn't really explain how Gandalf came to be there and how he lost his memories. I agree with John's comment last podcast. I think many of us kind of skipped over or skimmed the Hobbit parts of the stories when we were younger because they were a bit of a snooze. I actually never read The Hobbit myself. My only other criticism was I wanted more of the love story between Elendil and Muriel. I liked those characters together. Kudos to all of the performers. Morfydd Clark was a favourite all season, but I think Charlie Vickers pulled ahead for the win in this episode with his performance as Sauron Anatar. He went from menace to maniacal without being over the top. I am a new fan of his. And as always, thanks for your entertaining and informative podcast discussion of the show. Thanks so much, Angie.
Yeah, thanks, Angie, for the feedback. Always great to hear from you. I think, I would agree around skimming the Hobbit part. Certainly when it started delving into their history and past. But I think that's probably my general issue with, and again, don't shoot me, is J.R.R. Tolkien. I love his story.
Right.
And his story parts of it. And that's, I think, why I like The Hobbit the most, because it's the most accessible story. It doesn't wander or meander as much as The Lord of the Rings.
I love the meandering.
And yes, it provides context, but he was, maybe it shows my brain age, but he was trying to have something accessible for children. And I find it is his most accessible adult book, in a sense.
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit. You've got an entire chapter around sort of the eating habits or the construction elements of a hobbit or whatever. I'm just don't always gel with that, I guess.
I do remember first reading The Visit to Rivendell after having seen The Fellowship of the Ring, where The Fellowship of the Ring is the movie is totally focused on them all getting there, sitting around, deciding what to do with the rings, and reading in the book, it's about 40 or 50 pages about all the food that they eat, the songs that they sing in Rivendell. They're there for months before anything happens to do with the ring at all. I love Tolkien's writing. It's so filled with great descriptions and beautiful language. So I think we may be introducing ourselves in future on our Lord of the Rings podcast or our Rings of Power podcast as, here's John, he loves the stories of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm Derek, I love the writing of J.R.R. Tolkien.
No,
so maybe that's the way we should be introducing ourselves.
I love the visuals as well. Don't get me wrong, I love a good bit of descriptive writing. It's not like I'm, only going to want Mr. Men books or something like that. No, of course not. I just simply mean, and as I say, I think it's because I probably came at Lord of the Rings maybe too soon for me anyway, because I was doing it on the back of The Hobbit, because I loved The Hobbit as someone who read it quite young, and then went into The Lord of the Rings, and I was like, okay, this is 600, 700 odd pages of book. Yeah. It was way too much for me at that time. And again, it was focusing on creating a mythology.
Yes.
Well, that's why I didn't necessarily run with it. And, when I'm hearing the Silmarillion stuff, on our feedback, where Coffee and Vodka's saying, it's kind of a bit baffling, I can understand sometimes how that happens, But, I mean, the fact that work was needed in order to create these visual masterpieces as well,
Well, absolutely.
And describe an entirely new world.
Yeah, and that's why so many of us fell in love with those stories and those characters and the world of Middle-earth, because it was so well realized. I would say the Silmarillion would be akin to George R.R. Martin's House of the Dragon, his book there, versus George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has got a story, has got a lot of movement in it. They also are very dense and do stray into Tolkien's penchant for describing every item of food. But I would say that Silmarillion and House of the Dragon are probably quite similar. So if you liked the House of the Dragon book, you may like the Silmarillion book, I would say. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Angie. And we know somebody else is reading the Hobbits the same way as you do, John. Just skim over the Hobbit parts, get to the fighting and the battles.
Thanks, Angie.
Great stuff. Thanks, Angie. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us for this season of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and for all of your feedback. If you do want to get in contact with us, please keep emailing us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. But do stay subscribed to the podcast, because we're covering loads of other stuff at the moment. As we mentioned earlier on, we are covering The Penguin, which we're 3 episodes into of that show. We're about halfway through Marvel's Agatha All Along at the moment on Disney Plus as well. So lots and lots of stuff that we've been covering. But we think we may be doing a crossover on the Rings of Power with our friends over at Podcastica, Penny and Anwin. But we don't know when that's going to happen. They usually do a little bit of a break after they finish their coverage of a Rings of Power season. So it may come up later on in the year. But stay subscribed to the podcast. You'll get it on our feed here as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, fellow Ringers, for joining us for Season 2 of The Rings of Power. Please stay subscribed to the podcast and share the podcast whilst you wait for the next season of The Rings of Power, or join us elsewhere on our coverage of our other shows. Because, of course, sharing the podcast is sharing the love.
Yes, it is. Thanks so much for joining us. Speak to you next time.
Yes, fellow Ringers, until next time, Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep ringing.
Bye.
Ding dong. Bye.